Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Breaking news. Ginni Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, apparently did more to try and help overturn the 2020 presidential election results. And spineless Democrats aren't going to do a damn thing about it. In addition to what we already know, her 29 text messages to former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and others urging them to overturn the election results and keep Trump in office. She also tried to interfere in Arizona. We now are learning, this from the Washington Post just came out, that Ginni Thomas pressured Wisconsin lawmakers to overturn Biden's 2020 victory. Virginia Ginni Thomas, the conservative activist and wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, pressed lawmakers to overturn Joe Biden's 2020 victory, not only in Arizona, as previously reported, but also in a second battleground state, Wisconsin, according to emails obtained under the state's public record law. The Washington Post reported this year that Ginni Thomas emailed 29 Arizona state lawmakers, some of them twice, in November and December 2020. She urged them to set aside Biden's popular vote victory and, quote, choose their own presidential electors, despite the fact that the responsibility for choosing elector results rests with voters under Arizona state law. The new emails show that Thomas also messaged two Republican lawmakers in Wisconsin, State Senator Kathy Bernier, the chair of the Senate Elections Committee, and State Rep Gary Tauschen. Bernier and Tauschen received the email at 10:47 a.m. on November 9th, virtually the same time the Arizona lawmakers received a verbatim copy of the message from Thomas. The Bernier email was obtained by the Post, and the Tauschen email was obtained by the watchdog group Documented and provided by the Post. Thomas sent all the emails via Free Routes, an online platform that allowed people to send pre-written emails to multiple elected officials. Quote, please stand strong in the face of media and political pressure, read the emails sent November 9th, just days after media organizations called the presidency for Biden. Please reflect on the awesome authority granted to you by our Constitution. And then please take action to ensure that a clean slate of electors is chosen for our state. Neither Thomas nor her lawyer, Mark Paoletta, responded to requests for comment. Supreme Court spokesperson did not respond to a message seeking comment from Clarence Thomas. Jesus Christ. Let's just go through the other things before we get to this. If you forget, Thomas urged White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to pursue unrelenting efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Text message shows. She called Biden's victory the, quote, greatest heist of our history and told him that President Donald Trump should not concede. Let me just read just some of them. When Meadows wrote to Thomas on November 24th, the White House Chief of Staff invoked God to describe the effort to overturn the election. Quote, this is the fight of good versus evil, Meadows wrote. Evil always looks like the victor until the King of Kings triumphs. Do not grow weary in well-doing. The fight continues. I have staked my career on it. Well, at least my time in D.C. on it. Thomas replied, thank you. Needed that. This plus a conversation with my best friend just now. I will try to keep holding on. America is worth it. By the way, in reports in the past, Ginni Thomas and her hubby, Clarence Thomas, referred to each other as their best friends. So, who knows? Who would have thought who she's talking about in terms of her best friend? The messages, which do not directly reference Justice Thomas or the Supreme Court, show up for the first time how Ginni Thomas used her access to Trump's inner circle to promote and seek to guide the president's strategy to overturn the election results, and how receptive and grateful Meadows said he was to receive her advice. The text messages were among 2,320 that Meadows provided to the House Select Committee. Then you have Ginni Thomas emailed 29 Arizona lawmakers to help reverse Biden's win. Virginia Ginni Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, reached out to almost 30 Arizona lawmakers following former President Trump's defeat. I mean, it's just crazy. Absolutely insane. The emails encouraged the recipients to, quote, stand strong in the face of political and media pressure, arguing they have the power to choose Arizona's electors who vote in the Electoral College for president, but voters have the power to choose a state's electors by casting their ballots, not state legislatures, as Trump and his allies argued. I want to show this. Arguably unprecedented. Ethics experts say Clarence Thomas crossed the line with his January 6th ruling. If you don't know, Clarence Thomas was the lone Supreme Court justice to vote in favor of Donald Trump when it came to Donald Trump handing over certain documents pertaining to January 6th. Thomas's lone dissent in a January 6th records-related case came after his wife exchanged 29 texts with a former Trump official about overturning the 2020 election. Justice Clarence Thomas should have recused himself from a January 6th related case to avoid an appearance of a conflict of interest after his wife sent texts to a former Trump White House official urging overturning the 2020 election results, according to several judicial experts. This is not your run-of-the-mill close call. This is far beyond the line as any Supreme Court recusal question I have seen. And I've studied Supreme Court recusal all the way back to Marbury versus Madison, said James Sample, a law professor at Hofstra University. There is an order of magnitude of severity here that is arguably unprecedented. Washington Post and CBS reported Thursday that Thomas's wife, Ginni Thomas, exchanged 29 messages with former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Clarence Thomas later was the lone dissent in the Supreme Court's ruling rejecting Trump's bid to block the release of presidential records to the House committee investigating the insurrection. It's unclear if that subpoena for White House records would have included the texts for Ginni Thomas. Sample said Thomas should have already known his wife was involved in the January 6th events, given previous reporting, and then sought more information from her once the court took up the case. That, he said, should have led to a recusal in order to avoid creating an appearance of impropriety. Quote, he knew without a doubt that she was involved in the efforts to overturn the election. To then say, as a justice who has the constitutional obligation to ensure both fairness and the perception of fairness, that neither he nor his wife would communicate with each other once there was a case challenging disclosures of the White House record strikes me at best as putting his head in the sand and hoping for the best. Can you just imagine for a second if the husband of Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan or, Sonia Sotomayor or now Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Can you imagine Jackson Brown? Can you imagine if any one of their spouses had a far less polarizing conflict of interest that they refused to recuse themselves on? How quickly do you think it would take a Republican-controlled House and Senate, even at a 50-50 margin, where the vice president is the tiebreaker, like we have now with the Democratic majority? Can you imagine how long they would wait to begin impeachment proceedings against that liberal judge and then use their media apparatus, Fox News, Breitbart, all the right-wing YouTubers to get hysterical about it? It is remarkable. First of all, this isn't about a conflict of interest with Clarence Thomas. This is about, I don't know, any objective-minded person who would think Clarence Thomas wasn't fully aware of what his wife was doing when she was doing it, meaning, ranting about this is a fight of good versus evil and we need to save democracy and let me reach out to these Wisconsin people and these Arizona people and the White House Chief of Staff and try and help overturn the election results, which, by the way, Biden won. Got to say that on YouTube. Clarence Thomas, by all appearances, was involved with this. Clarence Thomas, by all appearances, approved of what his wife was doing. Clarence Thomas, by all appearances, is a MAGA loyalist. Clarence Thomas was the lone in a 8-1 decision, lone holdout, saying Donald Trump shouldn't have to hand over presidential records that the January 6th committee was seeking in their investigation. Even, Alito and Kavanaugh and Gorsuch said, yeah, that's a bridge too far. The fact that the Democratic Party had not already began impeachment proceedings, even if it would create a goddamn, there's a lot of talk about a civil war right now. Before this latest story, where she apparently was seeking Wisconsin lawmakers to overturn the results. And by the way, Biden only won Wisconsin by 20,000 votes. I think it was the smallest victory margin of victory. And this really isn't about like whether you're like progressive or conservative or whatever. I mean, I'm not like, I'm not a stand for the Democratic Party. Anyone who knows this channel knows we cover the Democratic Party equally, if not more critically, than the Republican Party. But just pure political strategy. This is a layup. Now, would he actually be removed? Probably not. But at a certain point, you have to fight. You have to show you are fighting. And I don't want to hear the devil's advocate position. Well, Jordan, if they start, trying to impeach a conservative judge, then you're just, changing the dynamic where the Republicans, once in power, will try to remove liberal judges. Well, what makes you think that Republicans aren't going to begin doing that anyway? Do you see what they're doing across the board in other things? I mean, as we speak right now, Republicans across the country, Trump loyalists, are trying to remove election officials across various states that certified the election for Joe Biden and replace them with MAGA loyalists so that they could literally steal the next election without having to storm the Capitol. Just put in MAGA loyalists as secretaries of states and other election positions, and then, not certify the election results if a Democrat wins. And I don't even think it's just for Trump. I think that would apply if it's DeSantis or another Republican. I mean, there is at least indirect evidence that Clarence Thomas was aware of what his wife was doing, was in conversation with his wife about this. She's talking about her best friend. Well, who's her best friend? She talking about Kathy over green tea and, scones? She's clearly talking about Clarence Thomas. Democrats should be immediately proceeding with impeachment hearings of Clarence Thomas, whether it would work or not. Show some fight. I mean, it's remarkable and pathetic. There's not even talk among the Democratic Party. So you just let Clarence Thomas and his wife try to, overturn election results? Who's the next? If in 2024, DeSantis becomes president or Trump becomes president again, if there's another opening, who are they going to put on the court next? A QAnon disciple? I mean, it's just crazy. And honestly, this probably isn't the last of it. I'm sure if she targeted Wisconsin, Arizona, I'm sure there's emails, her lobbying Pennsylvania lawmakers, Michigan lawmakers, who the hell knows? Georgia. Clarence Thomas should not be on the Supreme Court because his wife literally was working to overturn an election, which I believe is kind of against the Constitution that Supreme Court justices are sworn to upheld. Let me know in the comments. Will the Democratic Party do anything about this? I think not. Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.